Now, for gamers who really aren't familiar with your upcoming project, what can they expect from Sleeping Dogs?
Sleeping Dogs, it's an open world game set in Hong Kong where you play as Wei Shen, an undercover police officer who's been tasked with trying to take down the Triads. We've really tried to meld all the best aspects of Hong Kong cinema and action films all into one kind of really exciting gameplay experience, all within an open world setting.
Now, this particular game had a very interesting development cycle. It changed names, went back and forth. Can you speak to that a little bit?
We started out initially as a new IP, actually called Black Lotus, or codenamed Black Lotus. And after working on it for a while, we were working with Activision on the product, and they had an existing franchise called True Crime, which also involved an undercover police officer. So they decided they wanted to use that name and brand our game according to that. We continued to work on it for a few years. In the end, our relationship with Activision ended, and we continued to work on the title. We really believed in the game and were quite passionate about it. And very quickly thereafter, we met with Square. They loved it, saw tons of potential in the game, and the additional time we've had, the year plus, has been fantastic and really allowed us to polish it and make it a tight experience.
Now, for gamers who are familiar with the True Crime series, are there going to be influences from that game that'll make them love it?
I think people who enjoyed the True Crime series, what they really liked was sort of, the contrast of most open world games has you set as a gangster thug, and that's all you are, and you're just kind of causing havoc, all the time throughout the city. And what we've tried to do, as being an undercover cop, is that there are missions where you're actually strictly trying to uphold the law, while still maintaining your cover. You're gathering information on a serial killer, on a rash of deaths that have been occurring in street racing, gathering up enough intel on the person, getting photo surveillance, all sorts of kind of cop-like activities, and then eventually the person gets arrested. At the same time, while you're trying to keep your cover, you're also having to be a Triad enforcer, so break some skulls and do whatever is asked of you. So it's kind of really fun. I think that's what people enjoyed about the True Crime series, as well as being able to kind of be a bit of both sides, good guy and bad guy, versus just always the villain.
Yeah, you touched on it a little bit there. Your main protagonist, Wei Shen, he's involved with both of these parties in a very interesting and unique sort of way. How does the Triad and police conflict affect things like gameplay and the overall narrative?
I think we've approached this game very differently than most open world games, where the story often feels a little bit tacked on or secondary. We made it a priority for us from the beginning. We've worked with world-class writers from all around the globe who have worked on blockbuster films, and to really try and capture the kind of inner conflict and struggle that Wei goes through. At the very beginning, he's sworn to uphold the law as a police officer, but to keep his cover, he has to do things that kind of keep crossing those boundaries. As the game progresses, he actually, starts to find that he has loyalties towards these, thugs, these bad guys, and he's starting to question some of the motives or even, the methods at which his police officers are doing things. And we actually did a lot of research. We went to Hong Kong. We met with Triad gang members there. We met with the head of the sort of Triad task force and met with undercover police officers as well, or former undercover police officers, and talked about that. And we really kind of got a lot of good information from them. And we tried to reflect that in the game, of this sort of conflict, this inner turmoil that kind of gets worse and worse for Wei as the game progresses.
It's not going to be as simple as Triads are bad and police are good, or vice versa, right?
No, definitely not. We took some cues from the film The Departed or The Infernal Affairs, and it really does a good mix of kind of, there's a little bit of good and bad on sort of both sides of the fence.
Absolutely. Now, you said before Hong Kong is really the centerpiece within this game. You went there, you talked to these people. For gamers who are familiar with Hong Kong, what can players expect in terms of free roaming, varied environments, and these large set pieces?
Hong Kong was a really cool city to set a game in. It hasn't been done a lot in the past, and we love it because it's sort of East meets West culture. So there's some things that are familiar to us in Western culture, but a lot of things that are very shocking and quite different and unique. And so we did a lot of research. Like I said, we took tens of thousands of photos as reference for the game. And we've tried to make the world look as photorealistic as possible. And people who know Hong Kong will recognize a lot of the major landmarks that we have in the city. But we've played with the general layout, putting sort of gameplay first. What's going to work best for some of our street racing or our free running routes, and making sure that that's compelling, and then building out the rest of the city around that.
Again, are teasing on it really nicely. Side quest collectibles, those are some of the trademarks of any open world game. If you're a completionist like myself, how long do you think it'll take to get that 100%, and what can players expect along the way?
It's a big game with a lot of secondary content to do. We've got over 120 different sort of side missions, quests you can do, things like collecting debts, boosting cars, going on dates, doing favors for people, some that are more on the criminal side, some that are more on the police side. There's cop jobs and cases you can do, drug busts where you'll go kind of clean out a gang out of an area, get some photo surveillance of them doing drug deals, and afterwards that gang is then cleared out of that part of the city forever. So you actually are able to make sort of a difference as the game progresses. The city actually does clean up.
Okay.
And we've got a variety of collectibles as well, health shrines that'll boost your overall health, lock boxes that are hidden throughout the city with money, clothing, and some weapons. So lots of fun stuff for people to explore. And we've tried to, again, really focus on the Hong Kong culture. So there's karaoke to do. There's, betting on rooster fighting. There's illegal gambling dens.
Wow.
All things that are sort of core to Hong Kong culture.
Not just sort of ancillary sort of collectibles that have nothing to do with the environment or the gameplay, right?
Yeah, we try to tie everything back into sort of the core game, the experience. A lot of the secondary characters that you'll meet for some of these sort of side missions or quests are characters who are either hinted at or you meet in some of the main missions, but they're sort of someone's bodyguard or something like that, and they don't really have much of a speaking role. Then later on, you'll actually get to know them a little bit better through some of these additional missions.
Absolutely, which as a gamer is such a satisfying moment when you get a glimpse of that character that you thought was so mysterious and cool, and you didn't think you'd see them again, and then 15 hours later, there they are with their own set of quests, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It really helps kind of flesh out the story and the whole world. It makes it feel that much more believable, and you, the player, gets that much more immersed.
Now, this game, you said yourself, is so large and so big and has so many things to do. It was a laundry list of 10 to 20 very eclectic things that you can do. As a developer, what are some of the difficulties of creating an open world game with so much of this varied content operating in one world?
I'd be lying if I said it was easy to do. It's a series of sort of interconnected systems. I guess the best way to sort of explain is, if you think of a lot of games, you have sort of level one. Once you finish that level, you can get rid of all the characters, the moves, the whatever else may be related to it. And level two, you can start fresh. It's an open world game. Everything is always running, and everything is sort of dependent on itself. So we've had situations where, our first mission that we built out proved we were showing in at E3 and other events a few years ago. Still was getting broken up until a couple of months ago because a tweak we would make somewhere else completely unrelated in the world. So you're constantly just kind of going back, reevaluating, testing, making sure things work. And you have to be very clever in terms of your world design and your tech to make sure that, it looks great. It can compete with any of the more linear games out there in terms of its visual fidelity and its loading times, its frame rate. So it's definitely a challenge, but when it all comes together, it's a pretty fun experience. And as a developer, you kind of can sit back and look and just say, there's this huge world for people to explore, and they really get to enjoy it however they want, which is, kind of the goal of a sandbox open world game.
In a lot of sandbox and open world games, they have a lot of really fun and exciting collectibles and side quests to experience, but the overall narrative is usually on the straight and narrow. And what you're explaining here within Sleeping Dogs, that isn't the case. Can players expect a variety of sort of different endings depending on the choices they made throughout the game?
Something we've done that's pretty unique is a scoring system. So
Oh,
that
really?
at the end of each mission, you receive a score, a Triad score and a cop score. So how well did you complete that mission as a Triad enforcer? You know, taking out your enemies. A certain amount of that's actually reserved to style points. So a huge focus of our game is the hand-to-hand martial arts combat. And you know, if you just kind of mash on one button, you'll be able to take out a lot of your enemies, but if you do it with some style, put in some combos, use objects in the environment as well, we'll give you a higher score there. And then on the flip side is how well did you complete that mission as a cop? So hurting civilians, doing damage to the city, all of those things will deduct a score. And at the end, you take those points, it gets converted into sort of experience, and you're able to level up your player. So as the game progresses, you keep leveling up your player, which gives you new items, new moves you can unlock, martial arts moves, or kind of cool stuff like what we call action dismount, the ability to drive towards a group of enemies, jump off your motorcycle, shoot at the motorcycle, and it explodes, taking out nearby enemies and vehicles. Yeah, an homage to that sort of style of gameplay that, you know, you as the action hero are able to, you know, really kind of turn the tides on your enemies by taking simple objects in the environment and exploding them through and throwing an enemy into it. It creates kind of a variety of gameplay and, again, allows people to complete missions in very different ways.
You said he is the action hero, Wei Shen, so that means he has to do a little bit of everything. There's really, really cool slow motion hand to hand combat. Like you said, these acrobatic moves that have to do with free roaming and the classic slow motion gunplay. Do players ever need to make a choice as to what area to specialize in, or do these elements sort of seamlessly interact with one another while you're playing the game?
That's exactly it. We wanted to make it as seamless as possible so that the majority of the missions as well are really varied. So it's not like, oh, it's another shooting mission, it's another driving mission. We tried to make it so that, you know, the player starts out, some missions kind of all of a sudden are just thrust upon you where someone's broken in, kicked down the door and holding you at gunpoint and you start from there. Other ones are sort of more of a quest, hey, go find this person, and that's when the mission starts. But they often vary from some free running, hand-to-hand combat, driving and shooting. We have boats as well. And we tried to mix all those up so that, you know, if you think of the great action films, how a lot of those sequences kind of just flow really nicely. We tried to do the same sort of thing, and so the buttons are very intuitive to the player, so they're not trying to relearn a whole new set of controls now that they're in the car, now that they're in a boat. So, you know, the goal was always we wanted the player to feel like an action hero as they're playing through the game.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned before that there's so many of these little elements that are seamless. If you were able to take a screenshot or look at the gameplay from one person's Sleeping Dog main character Wei Shen compared to another, will there be great differences? Meaning, is there that level of customization that players can impart on their protagonist to make it their own?
Very much so. So depending on how much of the sort of secondary content you do, you gain, we call face, which is really your reputation.
Okay.
The higher your reputation, the more access to people you'll have. You'll meet new contacts. There's certain people who won't even speak to you, sell you items of clothes or cars until you've reached a certain face level. You'll also, you know, sort of we've seen in the Godfather movies or a lot of the gangster films, you get known around the neighborhood. People start to notice you, you know, kind of comment or say hello to you, give you discounts or free items as your reputation grows. And on the upgrade side, like I said, on the mission scoring, someone may decide that they just enjoy wreaking havoc and they'll go through and you know, play through the missions with no regard to the city or civilians or whatever it may be. They'll get high Triad points, very low cop points. So when they go to upgrade their player, it'll be quite different than their friend who may play missions very differently. You can always go back, replay a mission again if you want to try and do it a different way and see if you can try and get that perfect score, the right balance between cop and triad.
Well, again, this game sounds absolutely amazing, really, really ambitious, trying to create that fidelity with all of these small elements working together. Now, for gamers who think of games like this as maybe a little intimidating. I know that a lot of gamers, when they reach a game similar to the Skyrim or anything like that, they're intimidated to get started because they're worried that they're going to miss something or screw it up for their next 20 to 30 hours of gameplay. What have you done to ensure that players are introduced to these elements in a way that makes it seem comfortable but also exciting, that they want to keep looking and keep exploring?
That's a really great question. One of the things we tried to do is, in terms of pacing, so we've kind of joked around the office, thinking to the Spinal Tap, kind of famous quote of turning it up to 11.
Yeah.
We've seen in a lot of games where right out of the gate, it's sort of cranked up to 11, and it's all high shooting, explosions all the time. But if that's all there is throughout the game, then there's actually no sort of high points, low points. If you look at any great films, that you have your big explosion moments, but then there's sort of the calm before or after the storm. So what we tried to do is have the first few missions in a bit of more of an enclosed area where we can take the time to teach the player a few mechanics at a time. They're really able to get comfortable with sort of the free running, with the hand-to-hand combat, and we keep kind of layering on more moves they can learn. Then opening it up to the world, teaching them about driving, how to access all the different parts of the city, and then getting into more of the shooting and that sort of the gameplay as well, so that it keeps the player constantly engaged, a story that's really pulling them in, with some amazing voice talent, Tom Wilkinson, Lucy Liu, Edison Chen, Will Yun Lee for Hong Kong cinema fans, and trying to keep the player moving along and not trying to thrust too much upon them early on. And like you said, making sure that decisions they make early on haven't ruined gameplay for them later, that they're able to, that if you break a relationship, by doing something, you're able to mend it very quickly thereafter. So there's not something that you've kind of screwed up and you'll never be able to go back and enjoy that part of the game because of an early decision.
That's excellent, because I think that is the complaints that we get whenever we're talking about these with listeners, is that they love these games because they're so ambitious and they are so immersive, they lose themselves in it, but they take months and months to finish it because they're playing little bits at a time, fearful that if they do something a little too outrageous, it'll ruin the next 30 hours. And I think what you explained really helps players not fall for that sort of trap.
Yeah, we've looked at, there's obviously some great open world games out there, and us being a new game, a new IP in that genre, we really said, where do we see that there are opportunities to improve on sort of the current system or model, to make it more accessible to more people, to focus on the moment-to-moment gameplay, making the hand-to-hand combat great, the shooting great, the driving's a big one where people have said in previous games, Grand Theft Autos, the driving usually is kind of subpar. A lot of us worked at Black Box for years on the Need for Speed series, so we brought that experience to the game and really, again, made the driving, the free running, all those aspects on their own enjoyable to players. And it's been a lot of fun for us over the last several months doing lots of focus testing and seeing how different people sort of attach themselves to different parts of the game, love doing it, and they'll spend all their time just, going to fight clubs and kind of mastering that, or doing all the illegal street races. There's a bit of game there for everyone, which is just pretty exciting.
Excellent. Now, my last question is, you who have been involved with the game for so long, what would be a moment that you can share with us today that is kind of gives a great example of what Sleeping Dogs is, kind of the quintessential Sleeping Dogs moment that really, really resonated with you and that you think will resonate with players?
I think probably the most kind of exciting moments is the one I always still really love doing. One of the missions, you're chasing after a guy, so you've gone to his hangout, you do some hand-to-hand combat. Again, we have these sort of environmental props, so you're able to grab a car door and use that against an enemy, or throw a guy into a trunk, throwing a guy through a plain glass window, and then kind of then you pick up some guns. You kind of continue to move through this area, this junkyard, and again, we've kind of not had the player sort of sit back and you've got a gun and you're sort of waiting. It's more the Jet Li sort of style of you keep kind of running, vaulting over objects, shooting. We have slow-mo moments. But eventually, the guy gets away. He's driving ahead in a car. You jump on a motorcycle and you're chasing after him. He's got all of his, allies kind of coming up beside you in cars, trying to shoot out your bike. Eventually, near the end of the mission, you're standing on top of the motorcycle. You get nice and close. You leap from the motorcycle onto the other car and kick the driver out, and then you kind of captured this guy you've been chasing the whole mission. And just seeing Wei standing on top of this motorcycle going 100 miles an hour and leaping from that onto the car really makes me think back to all those great Jason Statham and Jackie Chan, Jet Li, all those awesome action moments where you felt like it doesn't quite look possible that he could do it, but just maybe if you're talented and athletic enough, maybe they could pull it off. And you get the opportunity to feel like that hero.
The moments that there's not a chance that you're ever going to miss a second of it because of distractions going on elsewhere, completely glued to the computer screen or TV sort of things.
Exactly. I think anytime we call it the action hijack of when you're able to jump sort of from a motorcycle onto another car, a van, and anytime someone does it the first time, they're in awe because I think it's something they've seen in movies for years, and it's probably as close as most of us, other than stuntmen out there and women, are ever going to get to actually doing it. And so you feel like you've got that control. It's pretty fun.
Absolutely. Now, I cannot wait for this game. When can we expect Sleeping Dogs, and for what systems?
It's coming out August 14th for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and Windows PC.
Excellent. Now, can I have your name one more time and your position at United Front Games, please?
Dan Sochan, producer at United Front Games.
Thank you again, Dan, for speaking to me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, this really seems like it's going to be one of the pinnacle products of 2012.
Yeah, we're really excited. And, it's great, obviously, chatting with the Canadian media. We're excited. We've gotten a lot of support from the games industry, locally and sort of around the country. And, been working on the game for 4.5 years. So we're pretty excited to get it out and get into people's hands.
All right, well, thank you very much, Dan. You have a great day.